one of the reasons that countries like the Dominican Republic and Venezuela contribute so many players is opportunity. For them, a lot of them, this is the best chance they'll ever have to really break out economically and uh, and make a name for themselves. It can be a difference between poverty and tremendous success. I think I don't know. It's sad to me to drive around and see fields on which nobody's playing. You might find 4 or 5 kids shooting baskets, but it takes a few more people to play baseball.
That was former music executive and current SABR member and author Bill Nowlin. Hello and welcome to episode 127 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. Bill Nowlin will be my guest on the show today, and we'll cover a ton of different topics. We'll talk about Native Americans, Venezuelans, and Irish players who have had an impact on Major League Baseball. We'll talk about growing the game for new generations, and we'll talk about his long career in the music industry. This is another interview that you could have seen weeks ago if you were a member of the Irish American Baseball Society. In an effort to give our members more for your memberships, I have been posting videos of many of our interviews on the Irish American Baseball Society's Community Network website weeks before the audio version airs on the podcast. I'm letting you know this for two different reasons. One, I think it's really important for all of you to join the Irish American Baseball Society. You can do that at irishbaseball.org. Two, I want you to understand why he says he's going to a Red Sox game tonight when the interview is airing in November. Let's get things started right now with Bill Nowlin. Thank you for joining us on the Irish Baseball Podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Rick.
So, first of all, we're going to talk a lot of baseball later. We're going to talk about everything you're doing with the Irish American Baseball Society and John Fitzgerald and Tim Carr. But before we get to any of that, I want to talk about your career in the music industry. There's a lot of crossover. We have a lot of really big music fans, whether they be Irish music fans or just general music fans. And you have a lot of experience in the music industry. So I'd like to hear about that for a little bit.
Well, in college, my roommate and I, this goes back a few years, I went to Tufts University, and my roommate Ken Irwin and I were both just folk music fans. That was kind of a fad in the early 60s, and we got into it with both feet. Ken figured out we could get free tickets to concerts by putting up posters around campus. So we really got going on that, and we saw an awful lot of music. Started doing even dramatic things like hitchhiking down in North Carolina to see a Fiddlers convention. And I wouldn't be hitchhiking these days, but back in the 1965, 66, that was okay to do. And it was a lot of fun. And we ended up starting a record company, Rounder Records, launched that in 1970 after we both graduated a few years later. And we had a startup capital of $1,000, $1,200, and built it from there with a lot of help from a lot of people giving us ideas, suggestions, helping out, donating cover photographs for the albums and so forth. It was a real kind of a community thing, and it grew, and we ended up putting out over 3,500 albums.
Wow, and did you focus on folk music with your record label, or did you branch out into other areas?
It was mostly folk roots based, as we called it, and now that would get into blues. With blues roots, we had, I ended up working on, I don't know, maybe a couple dozen African music labels. I took a couple trips to Africa, and we had an active reggae label, which was another form of Jamaican roots music. We put out, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70 albums of reggae music, but it was mostly American folk roots, bluegrass, old time country music, some folk singers, and then instrumentalists of one kind or another.
Wow, that's amazing. What did you look for in artists that you thought, okay, this is a record that really needs to be heard? Did you think I want to find different genres to share with people, genres that maybe they wouldn't know traditionally? Or were you just looking at it doesn't matter what genre of music, if you can play, you can play?
I'd say it was kind of a combination of all those things. It had to be somebody that if we got to know them, somebody that we liked. It wasn't just, we wanted to have a working relationship, an ongoing relationship, and do more than just one-off type of album. So there were people that we, just didn't feel would be the right fit, and maybe we made some business mistakes in that way. I don't know, but that was what we. It had to be something we enjoyed: the music, the people, and something that, as you suggest, that meant something. It may have fit some area that we thought hadn't been explored as much. We had, as I suggested before, a lot of people that came to us with ideas and convinced us, you really ought to do this because.
There's such a great similarity between, especially when you're talking about roots music or folk music and baseball, because this is a country that brings in people from all over the world. So you have people coming over from Ireland who play the fiddle. You have people coming over from other countries who play different instruments, who have different types of musical backgrounds. And they come here and they build, the black population puts together blues. And, there's the country music that gets built out of the Appalachia area. And all of these things come together. A lot of the reason is because of people coming from other countries and people coming from other backgrounds. And in baseball, in the early years of baseball, it was a lot like that too. The upper classes weren't playing baseball in the early days. It was the Irish immigrants, it was immigrants from Eastern Europe. And then, of course, we start seeing more black and Latino players coming into the league after the end of segregation. And I feel like those are the two areas where, if we have an American heritage, it is those two areas: baseball and especially folk and blues music.
Yeah, and they both draw from all kinds of today. They both all draw from all kinds of backgrounds. I mean, you don't think of the banjo as its origin in Africa. That's where it originally began, and yet you think of it today as you know hillbilly music, uh, played by whites from Appalachia when we started out. But different things come together, different elements join, and it was with baseball as well, as you suggested. It was definitely more limited in some ways as it began, and yet it's appealed to broader and broader backgrounds. We've got a book in the works on kind of combining music and baseball. I don't know all the directions it's going to go. We've just started it up. I'm with Society of American Baseball Research, SABR, and we publish a lot of books. We're going to be doing the book on Irish Americans and the Irish roots of baseball and all as well. And we've got a Venezuelans book coming out this year, and we've got a book on Native American ball players also coming out this year. All kinds of things coming together.
So when you talk about this combination of baseball and music, which I know you're in the early processes, so you don't know exactly how the book is going to come out here, but what are some areas that you're looking into to put together this book? Are you looking at, sort of what was happening in music at the time and what was happening in baseball at the time, or is it something different?
It'll be a combination of all kinds of things. I mean, there would probably be a brief essay on the Star Spangled Banner as the national anthem always being sung before baseball games. It's just something that began in the more or less around World War One. There are most players these days have walk-up songs when they come to bat. There's a certain song that goes along with them. Many teams have victory songs. I'm a Red Sox fan from Boston, and for some reason, Sweet Caroline always gets played in the eighth inning. If they win the game, Take Me Out to the Ball Game was already played in the seventh inning. If the Red Sox win, they have a victory song, Love That Dirty Water by the Standells. A weird choice, but it's a song about Boston, the grittiness of Boston in some ways, and it's a song I hope to hear tonight.
And yes, you are going to a Red Sox game after we finish this conversation. You know, when you talk about the songs that teams play after a win, and it is definitely a part of the experience of going to see one team. Like when you're a fan of a team, that becomes part of the game day experience, is hoping that you get to hear that song. And my two favorites are actually from my two favorite teams in baseball. And it is Dirty Water, which is such a great song to play at the end, and the Dodgers with I Love LA. And the reason that I love both of those two is they're both kind of tongue in cheek. Like they both kind of let you know that our city's not perfect, right? Our city has its flaws, but we love it and we embrace it and we're all part of this community because yeah, New York by Sinatra, like that's an amazing song and Frank might have the greatest voice of all time, but it's so flashy and it's so like uplifting. It doesn't show the cracks, which are the things that I love in a city. I love the grittiness of a city, like you mentioned earlier. So I think that is an interesting topic that I think a lot of people have discussed, but it has never been really put out there like you're looking to put it out there in this book. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, actually, this spring I went to a game in Monterrey, Mexico. The Red Sox played two games down there against the Monterrey team from the Mexican Baseball League, and they just had nonstop music. It was unbelievable. The stadium just on and on and on, too loud, but that's not the problem in general these days at baseball parks. But they were very generous. The Red Sox won the game, and they still played the Red Sox victory anthem, even though their team lost. And I thought that was very generous of them.
No, that is a very interesting topic that doesn't get addressed enough. Now, I want to move over to your book on Native American baseball players because this is another area that I think is underappreciated, underrepresented. I think a lot of times there were a lot of Native American players who just did a really good job of, you know, quote unquote, passing as white. So we might not have known about their backgrounds. But then, even still, in my opinion, the greatest athlete of all time, Jim Thorpe, played something like a handful of seasons in Major League Baseball. It wasn't his best sport, but you know, you look at somebody like Jim Thorpe, who was such a good athlete that he could just walk onto a Major League Baseball team and be about a replacement level player.
Yeah, well, there have been a number over the years. This book will feature, I think it's about 42 players who were clearly Native American. There were a number of people that were maybe part Native American, but they never enrolled with a given tribe or nation. Their players, Johnny Bench was kind of famous one in recent years, but he was never enrolled as a player, so as a tribal member. So he actually won't be in the book, whereas some others like Jacoby Ellsbury will be, and he was the first Navajo to play baseball. The second one just started this year, Anthony Siegler, who's just broken in, and over time there's been a good number of them, and going back to the very earliest days of the 20th century.
So, one of the things that we do here at the Irish American Baseball Society is we teach classes, or we have camps, or we have just 1 day practices over in Ireland to teach kids over there the game. Would you feel that something like that is maybe needed now in the Native American communities, maybe on some of the reservations? Are kids learning the game in Native American communities? Do they have the resources and the equipment to be able to have success? Because, like you said, there are possibly untapped resources in these communities. They might not be getting the background and the training and the practice that they need, but there could be a lot of talent in there.
Yeah, but I don't think the communities are as isolated now as they certainly were, say, 100 years ago. It used to be there were schools that were set up just for Native Americans, and they were in them whether they wanted to be or not. And many of them went on to baseball and so forth. These days, I think that there's a lot of people that they just happen to have Native ancestry, but they're uh, integrated, let's say, into society along with everyone else, not necessarily on a reservation, may have never even visited a reservation. I think that, it's baseball hopefully welcomes people from all over if the talent's there, and maybe this book will inspire some kids that might have said, "Gee, I didn't know that," and they go out and try a little harder.
Yeah, the first thing that always pops into my mind whenever I'm thinking about any of these different groups of people who have had success in the game before is, are we reaching them now, right?
Yeah.
And I lived in Arizona about a decade ago. I lived there for 4 years, and our property went basically right up to one of the local reservations, and we interacted a lot more with Native Americans than I do back here in Pennsylvania, where I live now. But it was definitely a situation where on a lot of these reservations, they just didn't have enough. And I was wondering if, I guess that's something that maybe to look into to try to make sure that the reservations, the bigger communities with a high percentage of Native Americans, are having the resources to teach their kids the game, because my main goal is that this game continues and it grows with everybody, because some of the younger generations are gravitating towards, for basketball, all you need is, even if you have a ratty pair of sneakers,
Mhm.
you can play in a ratty pair of sneakers, and probably somebody at the park has a ball. You might not even need a ball to play basketball. And a lot of schools put a lot of money in their football programs. They have some other sports, but baseball, it's a little more expensive. And in the early years, a lot of the effort, a lot of the responsibility in paying for it goes to the families of the players and not necessarily the schools. So that was just something that I thought of because of your book. Now, let's talk about Venezuela, because that is another real hotbed of talent. I mean, when you start talking, you're talking way more than 40 players when you're talking about the talent to come out of Venezuela. So, what was that book focused on more? Was it just sharing all types of players, or was it focusing on some of the bigger names?
Yeah, it pretty much focuses on the bigger names, people that have completed their careers. So someone like Jose Altuve, who is still playing today, he'll be mentioned in the book, but there won't be an article about him. There'll be mostly biographies of the 40 or 50 key players over the years that have come from Venezuela and completed their career. And I don't know, one of the big differences to me one of the reasons that countries like the Dominican Republic and Venezuela contribute so many players is opportunity. For them, a lot of them, this is the best chance they'll ever have to really break out economically and uh, and make a name for themselves. It can be a difference between poverty and tremendous success. I think I don't know. It's sad to me to drive around and see fields on which nobody's playing. You might find four or five kids shooting baskets, but it takes a few more people to play baseball. You need to have, a dozen or so anyhow. You don't necessarily have to have two teams of nine, but you need to have a fair number of people, and you can hit to one side of the field or something. But it's a team sport that really requires a significant number of people, and requires some dedication. If the goal is there to succeed economically, you can become fabulously wealthy. Obviously, if you're a very good player, a lot of the players this year got $5 million as a signing bonus. That was the day they turned professional. They came out of colleges. Maybe the Cape Cod League, the Alaska Baseball League, some of the collegiate wooden bat leagues. But they came from someplace, and it's still there. It's just seems to have a greater appeal to some of the countries that have bigger needs than perhaps our country has in the US.
So one of the things that drives me nuts when you talk about driving around and seeing a baseball field that's not being used, and sometimes that can be because kids don't have enough players to get together and play a full game. But when I was a kid, you know, I had a best friend. He lived across the street. We would often not have other people. So we would do home run derby, or we would, you know, if you hit it out of the infield, it's a single. If like we would come up with ways to continue to play the game, even if it was just the two of us pitching to each other and just hitting a bucket of balls into the outfield. And I don't think kids can do that now because a lot of the times they lock the gates on the field at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And, you'll look and you'll see a field and you're like, how do I get onto that field? If I were 12 years old and I'm here with my best friend and we got a bucket of balls and we want to play home run derby, I can't get on this field. Like, they've got it locked up. And I know there's liability issues and I know there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I do feel like there has to be a way that we can just keep baseball fields unlocked until it's nighttime and it would be dangerous,
I hadn't noticed that myself. I maybe we don't have as many locked fields around here, but I just see open fields and nobody using them. And
it could depend on the part of the country where you live,
yeah,
obviously, but anytime I see that, it drives me crazy. It's just like everybody should be able to just run onto an empty field and play. And I hope we get more of that in the future. Getting back to the Venezuelan baseball thing, and it's a topic that needs to be discussed. We try to stay away from politics as much as possible, but with the Little League team not being able to play in the Little League World Series and not be able to come to Williamsport, that was a pretty big story to have to do with Venezuelan baseball. So I wanted to get your opinions on that for a second.
yeah, I mean, Cuban baseball. They haven't been able to really. Uh, it's been a long, long time since there's been a good free interchange with Cuba, and I'd like to see that all open up more.
I think the World Baseball Classic has done a good job of making sure that, Cuba's able to play.
They
Maybe
have.
Cuba sends different players than they would under different circumstances. They might send a little older players to the World Baseball Classic because they're less likely to try to defect to sign a contract because maybe they're 30. But it does feel like they've done a good job with the World Baseball Classic and trying to make sure that we have this interchange where if China makes it, Chinese players are going to be coming. If Cuba makes it, Cuban players are going to be coming. Venezuela, the same thing. So the World Baseball Classic has done a really good job of kind of bridging those gaps. Hopefully, it will lead to more bridging of gaps in youth baseball.
I agree completely. Yeah, I think they have done a good job.
So, how did you get involved with SABR?
Let's see. I heard about the organization. I joined it in around 1988 for a year, and at that point, it didn't do anything for me, so I just let my membership lapse. But then they put on occasional meetings in the Boston area, and I went to one or two. But then in 2002, the national convention was here, and the people in the Boston area were talking it up, and I just got more involved at that time, knowing that we were going to host a whole bunch of people. So I went in 2001. I went out to I think it was Milwaukee to see what a convention was like, so I could help do a better job for the one in Boston. And it was just a wonderful experience. Put together some great panels, and SABR conventions are, 500 plus people, and it's day and night. It's just nonstop. People that maybe don't have as many other people to talk to about baseball all the time, and they get together, and you can't stop talking. It's just the most obscure stuff gets followed up on, and it's an amazing experience, and I found them to be SABR members so helpful. If you get an idea you want to track down and follow up on, there's a lot of chat rooms and email lists and so forth. You could put out a call there, and almost certainly you're going to get somebody that will try to help and usually can help to some degree with what you're trying to, whatever rabbit hole you're trying to go down.
And I know that a lot of times now I'm a big fan of the analytics, but I know that a lot of people aren't. They are more, quote unquote, old school baseball fans. But SABR is not just about sabermetrics and the analytics. It is definitely about researching the history of the game, about, well, a lot of what you are doing here, researching Native American players, researching Venezuelan players, looking back on the history of the game and trying to bring some of those older stories to life. So, do you think that SABR kind of gets labeled with this umbrella of being an analytics organization, or do most people who have a real interest in the organization know the real depths of what they do there?
I think a few years ago, I think it was seen more as an analytics oriented group. And as you say, the word sabermetrics came right out of SABR. Uh, my interest has never been that. My interest has always been biography, telling the stories of the people that play the game, what their parents did for a living, how they first got involved, who helped them along the way, what were the breakthroughs that helped them perhaps persevere. And I also enjoy, we have a thing called Games Project, where we just write up individual games, a game that stands out for one reason or another. Uh, it could be, Hank Aaron hitting the 715th home run and breaking Babe Ruth's record. That's kind of an obvious one. But every night, there's something that seems to be a little different that happens. And every week, every Friday, we have a newsletter that comes out. And there's usually about maybe an average of 8 or 9 new games that somebody has in the organization has written up. I've been writing up a lot of Ted Williams games because he was my idol growing up. So I've written up a lot of games that he took part in.
Yeah, that's incredible. I just think that it is important to stress the fact that SABR is more than just the analytics. Like, if you want to do the analytics, they've got that. It's covered. Like, you can definitely do that. But if your interest is more, like you said, in the biography, they have that as well. It's definitely an organization where you can get out of it what you want. And the people in the organization are very, very active, which I think
Yeah.
is the best thing you can ask for in a group.
We have an arts committee that will relate to the music and baseball book, but their focus has mostly been on visual art, like paintings or poetry, for instance. That's another strong element of the arts committee.
So before we go here, I want to talk about your work with the Irish American Baseball Society and our president, John Fitzgerald, and Tim Carr, who does a lot of our research into genealogy. So, what are you doing with those two gentlemen?
We're just beginning the process of a book that will focus on the connections there, and I'm not entirely sure all the directions it's going to take. We're very open to new ideas. So if anybody happen to be listening to this podcast and wants to suggest an idea for an article, even if you don't want to write it yourself, let us know about it, and we probably find somebody that might be interested in it. We want to try to explore it from almost every direction you can, and the combination of Irish background, there's a historic aspect to it. It would be nice, of course, if more kids in Ireland today were playing baseball, and maybe that'll start happening too. Who knows?
Well, we're working hard on
Yeah.
making that happen as well. So, hopefully, there will be some chapters that we can add in future editions of the
Right.
book, or we can talk about some of those players. The early days of the game are so rich for Irish players because, I mean, if you look at those old rosters, it is just Irish name after Irish name after Irish name. Some of them born in Ireland, some of them just with Irish roots. But I think this is going to be a real wellspring of information for you. You're going to have so many different ways that you can go with this book.
Yeah, I mean, it was back in the late 1800s and the first few decades of the 1900s. It was certainly a means of assimilation, and people that enjoyed getting together with a group of other people and playing a game that just resonated somehow. There were opportunities, openings, and talent came through. People like Connie Mack, McGillicuddy was his name, but you never know.
Absolutely. And what gives you the passion to research all of these players? Like, maybe I'm making assumptions, but looking at you right now over Zoom, you don't look Venezuelan. I don't think that you have very deep Irish roots, but what gives you the interest to go look into some of these players, even though you might not have that heritage connection with them, but you want to go find these stories and share them with new generations?
The same reason that our interest in folk music took me to Africa and so forth. It's just looking for interesting stories and connections. I actually think my name is anglicized Irish. I think my name was originally Nowlin, and I think somebody tried to make it a little more highfalutin or something like that and changed it. I don't really know the story behind that, my own ancestry. Such as I've looked into it, it seems to be a whole mixture of English, Irish, Scottish, French, Belgian. I can find them all. It's just like American.
Well, Tim Carr might be able to help you out with that
Yeah.
because he loves to dig into that. And I find it interesting to hear what motivates people to just go and find these stories because there's something about, I try to find interesting stories to tell here on the podcast.
Yeah.
And people try to find, John Fitzgerald, the president of the Irish American Baseball Society, has done documentaries, has done television shows about baseball. And there's just something about the people who love to go find that obscure story that, I think there's definitely a passion running through that. And it's great when we can all get together through organizations like the Irish American Baseball Society and SABR, and that's great. So I really appreciate all you're doing to keep the game alive and keep, you know, documenting this history.
When you go to a baseball game, you never know what you're going to see. And often you're going to see something that maybe hasn't quite happened before or hasn't happened just that way. often I find myself turning to somebody else and saying, "Hey, have you ever seen this happen before?" It's just, I don't know, it's fascinating. And I like going down all those little avenues, trying to figure this out and figure that out.
And one of the things about baseball that I think makes it the greatest sport in the world is it has that history. Whereas, I love basketball. I'm 6'4". They pushed me to play basketball my entire life. And I love it. And I love to go out to the courts and, shoot baskets. But a lot of the NBA teams started in maybe the 50s. Like maybe if you're lucky, they started in the 50s. And the NFL really didn't get to the Super Bowl era until the 60s. And baseball has this history. And when you go to Fenway Park and you think Babe Ruth pitched on that mound and he batted in that left-handed batter's box, and then a few years later Ted Williams was there, and then Yaz took over, and then it was Jim Rice, and then it was Mike Greenwell, and then it was Manny Ramirez, and you have this progression where you can see a much bigger history than with any of the other sports, and it makes it feel like you're connected to something that's a little bigger than you. I love basketball. I'm not putting it down at all, but when you hear people put together their 5 greatest, 10 greatest basketball players of all time, they'll have guys who are still playing. And maybe one guy who's still playing will pop up into your baseball list if you're really high on Ohtani or Judge. But basically, if you're not, nobody who's currently playing the game is going to come anywhere near your top 10. And it's going to be guys from the 70s, 50s, 40s, 20s. So I think that's something that really makes this game great. And when people like you go and preserve it and make sure that that history doesn't slip away, that's really important. So Bill Nowlin, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
I'm your host, Rick Becker, and this has been episode 127 of the Irish Baseball Podcast.